They say some houses breathe, some groan, some even whisper in the middle of the night. But there are others that do something far more terrifying. They watch, silent, patient, always waiting. And once you step inside, you begin to realize you're not the one observing the house. The house is observing you. The house that watches you. On the edge of a forgotten town, tucked behind rows of skeletal trees and crooked fences, stood a mansion everyone avoided. Children dared each other to touch its rusted gates but never lingered. Old men whispered about the strange happenings. Travelers passed quickly, refusing even to glance its way. It had been abandoned for over 60 years, its windows cracked like dead eyes, its roof bent under decades of storms. But the strangest thing, the detail no one ever forgot, was that the house seemed to follow you. As you walked past on the dirt road, its windows aligned perfectly, as though 100 hidden eyes tracked every movement. And if you dared to stop, dared to look too long, you swore the glass panes flickered, as if something inside blinked back. Locals called it the house that watches you, and for most people that was warning enough to stay away. But not for Daniel. Main narrative. Daniel was a researcher of urban legends, a skeptic who made his living debunking myths and local ghost tales. He wasn't afraid of old beams and broken glass. He believed in termites, mold, structural weakness, not demons or spirits. And when he heard about this place, he thought it would make the perfect centerpiece for his new book, Houses of Fear, Why We See Monsters in Empty Rooms. But the deeper he dug, the less sense it made. Town records on the house were incomplete, pages torn from old archives. The deeds never transferred. The family who built it, the Mather family, had no graves in the town cemetery, no descendants, no records of moving away. They simply vanished. Neighbors said one day smoke no longer curled from its chimneys, and within weeks the place felt like a carcass left in the woods, rotting but not quite gone. Of course, this intrigued Daniel. Every legend starts with a kernel of truth. So, he packed his bag, recorder, notebook, flashlight, and camera, and drove to the decaying town. The closer he got, the quieter the world became. Birds no longer sang. The wind fell to a hush. And when he parked at the foot of the cracked dirt road, even the crickets seemed to stop their midnight chorus. That's when he saw it, rising in the distance like a massive shadow, its silhouette jagged against the sky, windows glinting faintly, even though the clouds had buried the moon. The house. It was larger than he expected, 3 stories of dark brick and warped wood, with a tower that leaned ever so slightly, like a crooked finger beckoning him forward. And though he hadn't yet stepped inside, Daniel already felt it, that sensation of being studied, watched, as though the house had already noticed his arrival. He shook it off and whispered to himself, "Just a story, just a house." But his voice didn't sound convincing. Inside, the air was thicker than outside, carrying the weight of mold and dust. His flashlight cut through the gloom, catching motes that floated like tiny ghosts in the stale air. Wallpaper peeled in long strips, curling like tongues, revealing cracked plaster beneath. Every board creaked as though announcing his presence. Daniel raised his recorder. September 14th, 11:42 p.m. Entry successful. The house is structurally unstable but not dangerous enough to prevent exploration. Initial feelings, overwhelming presence, possibly psychological effect due to the legend. His words echoed unnaturally, bouncing too many times in the empty rooms, almost like someone repeated them back from the shadows. He ignored it. The foyer opened into a grand staircase, the kind you'd see in old aristocratic mansions. Dust clung to the railings, but what unsettled him was the portrait at the landing. A massive canvas, obscured by grime, but still vivid enough to show a family. A man, tall and stern. A woman, seated, her eyes pale and distant. And 2 children, their smiles almost too wide. Daniel stepped closer, raising his flashlight. The faces were odd. The eyes seemed slightly too large, painted in glossy detail. And worse, they seemed to shimmer when the light hit them, as though a layer of wet varnish still coated them after all these decades. He blinked, and for the briefest second he thought the children's heads tilted, just slightly, just enough to notice. He stumbled back, laughing nervously. "Optical illusion," he muttered. "That's all." But he could not shake the feeling that the painted family wasn't just looking at him. They were watching him, tracking him. The deeper Daniel moved into the house, the more he noticed its design was subtly wrong. Hallways stretched longer than they should. Doors opened into rooms that were smaller inside than the outside walls suggested. His flashlight beam seemed swallowed by corners that should not exist. And then came the noises. A faint click, like a camera shutter. He froze. The sound echoed softly from behind him. He whipped around, light sweeping the corridor. Nothing. Dust, shadows, wallpaper. But his heart hammered. He knew that sound. He had heard it too many times before while documenting places like this. It wasn't a rat. It wasn't wood settling. It was a lens. Something in this house had just taken his picture. Daniel licked his lips, raising the recorder again. His voice trembled, but he forced himself to speak. "Unexplained auditory phenomenon. Resembles mechanical shutter. Location, West Corridor. I am proceeding with caution." But as he clicked the recorder off, he heard it again. Click. Closer this time. The sensation of eyes burning into his back returned, stronger than ever. He spun again. Nothing. But he could feel it. The walls themselves seemed to lean closer, their cracks widening like pupils dilating in the dark. He entered a study filled with dust-choked shelves. Hundreds of books sat rotting, their spines unreadable. On the desk lay a diary, its leather warped but intact. He brushed it open, coughing at the cloud of dust. The handwriting was elegant, flowing. It belonged to the man of the portrait, the patriarch of the Mather family. The house is learning. Each day it sees more. Each day it remembers. It no longer needs us to watch over it, for it has begun to watch us. Daniel froze. Every page after that was filled with jagged scrawls, as if written in a frenzy. Words repeated, eyes, shutters, hunger. And at the very end, one chilling line. "If you read this, the house already knows you." A cold shiver ran down Daniel's spine. He snapped the diary shut and stuffed it into his bag. But as he did, something shifted in the corner of his vision. The portrait from the foyer. It was here. But that wasn't possible. He had left it 2 rooms behind. Yet here it stood, propped against the wall, the family's painted eyes locked on him. And this time, there was no mistaking it. The children's heads had tilted further, and they were smiling wider. Daniel's breath hitched. He stumbled back, bumping into the desk. The recorder fell, skittering across the floor, still running. His flashlight flickered, dimming in and out. That's when he heard it. Not just the click, but a whisper, faint, multiplied, coming from every wall at once. "We see you." Daniel raised his light, hands trembling, and the family in the portrait blinked. Darkness swallowed the room. The door had shut behind them with a groan that didn't belong to rotting wood, but to something alive, something aware. Emily and Daniel froze in the foyer, their breaths misting faintly in the cold air that seemed to rise from the very bones of the house. The chandeliers above were coated in dust and cobwebs, but the faintest flicker of candlelight danced in their glass curves, even though neither of them had lit a flame. Emily whispered, her voice cracking, "Did you see that?" Daniel swallowed hard, his hand gripping the flashlight tighter. "It's probably the wind," but there was no wind inside, only silence. Silence that pressed down like a heavy blanket, broken only by the low hum. Not mechanical, not electrical, but something like a breath, reverberating through the walls. They moved deeper into the hall, portraits staring down from cracked frames. The eyes seemed too perfect, too focused. Daniel flashed his light across one of them, a woman in a black Victorian dress. Her lips were painted thin, unsmiling, her eyes sharp and unblinking. As the light shifted away, Emily gasped. She turned her head. Daniel froze. No, she didn't. He turned the flashlight back, The woman's face was unchanged, yet something in the angle of her gaze was wrong. She wasn't staring into the hall anymore. She was staring directly at them. The air grew colder as they climbed the staircase. Every step groaned, but it wasn't the sound of wood giving way. It was the sound of something deep beneath the surface, like ribs cracking under weight. Emily felt it vibrate through her shoes. At the landing, a corridor stretched endlessly, doors lining both sides. Some were closed, others hung open, their black interiors yawning like mouths. And then came the whisper. At first, Daniel thought it was Emily. A low murmur, just at the edge of hearing. He turned to her. "Did you say something?" Emily shook her head, her lips pressed shut. The whisper rose again, this time clearer. It came from all directions at once, a dozen voices speaking in broken fragments. "Don't look. They see." Closer now. Emily's knees buckled and she grabbed Daniel's arm. "It's inside my head." He wanted to run. Every muscle in his body screamed for it. But the house was alive, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that turning back now wasn't possible. They pushed forward, into one of the open rooms. Inside was a nursery. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, faded images of moons and stars smiling down. A crib sat in the corner, rocking gently, though the air was still. Daniel raised the flashlight. The crib was empty. Then a small rattle on the floor began to move. Slowly, it rolled across the boards, stopping at Emily's feet. She bent, trembling, and picked it up. The toy was warm. Her breath caught. "Daniel, it's warm." Before she could say another word, the crib slammed against the wall with a deafening crack. Both of them stumbled back, the flashlight slipping, its beam scattering wildly across the room. And in that frantic light, they saw them, figures, not solid, not fully visible, but impressions of bodies, pale as ash, standing in the corners of the room. Their faces were blurred, but their eyes were pits of black, absorbing all light. One stepped forward, its head jerking unnaturally like a broken puppet. The sound of its bones grinding filled the room. Emily screamed, grabbing Daniel's arm. "We need to get out, now!" They bolted from the nursery, slamming the door behind them, but the sound followed. The scraping of wood, the pounding of fists against the other side. The whispers grew louder, now rising into anguished cries. "Leave! Stay! Join us!" The corridor stretched longer than before. Every time they passed a door, it seemed to multiply. More rooms, more mouths yawning open. Daniel's flashlight flickered violently, and for a second, the beam illuminated something that shouldn't have been there at all. A mirror, taller than a man, standing at the end of the hallway. Emily clutched his hand. That wasn't there before. They moved closer, drawn by some force they couldn't resist. The mirror reflected the corridor, but not them. The hallway inside the mirror was empty, yet the doors there swung open one by one. Shadows emerged, walking slowly, deliberately, toward the glass. Emily's voice broke. "They're coming here." The shadows pressed against the inside of the mirror, their hands smearing black trails across the glass. Cracks began to spread, spiderwebbing across its surface. Daniel lunged forward, grabbing Emily. "Run!" But as they turned, the hallway behind them had changed. The staircase was gone, the exit was gone. There was only more hallway, endless, looping, with doors that all led deeper into the dark. The mirror shattered, and something stepped out. Not shadow, not human, but a figure wrapped in torn fabric, its head tilted, its face hidden beneath strips of cloth like bandages. Its chest rose and fell with a slow, unnatural rhythm. It spoke, not with a mouth, but with the entire house. "You should not have come." The walls shook, doors slammed one by one, sealing them in. Emily sobbed, gripping Daniel's hand so tight her nails dug into his skin. "What do we do?" Daniel looked at the figure, at the endless hall, at the house that seemed to be closing its jaws around them. And he realized the truth. The house wasn't haunted. The house was alive, and it had been waiting for them. The figure stood in the ruins of the mirror, jagged glass glinting around its feet. Its cloth-wrapped head tilted unnaturally, like it was studying them, not with eyes, but with something far deeper. Emily's chest heaved as her nails dug into Daniel's arm. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Daniel couldn't answer. The thing exhaled, and the air grew heavier, thicker, as though the very atmosphere bent to its will. The boards underfoot groaned, the walls pulsed like veins, and somewhere far above them, the ceiling creaked in rhythm with the figure's breath. The house wasn't just alive, it was breathing. The figure's bandaged head jerked. Slowly, it lifted one hand, its fingers long, sharp, twisted. With a sickening scrape, it dragged its nails down the wall beside it. The plaster cracked open, oozing something black and tar-like. The smell of rot filled the hall. Emily gagged, covering her mouth. The figure spoke again, not from its hidden lips, but through every wall, every floorboard, every shadow. "You came to see but you were already seen." The words echoed, bending in Daniel's skull until they felt branded into his thoughts. He grabbed Emily's wrist, forcing her backward. "Move," he hissed. They bolted down the corridor, but the hall twisted around them, bending like a serpent. Doors opened on their own, each revealing fragments of horror. A dining room where chairs rocked though no one sat in them. A bathroom with a clawfoot tub brimming with crimson water that dripped across the tiles. A library where books flew from shelves and landed open on pages filled with frantic scribbled warnings. "Don't look at the windows. Don't look at the windows." Emily's chest was burning, but she refused to stop. She could feel the figure behind them, its slow, steady steps shaking the house with each movement. No matter how fast they ran, it followed with the same unhurried rhythm. And then, suddenly, the hallway ended. They stumbled into a massive chamber, an atrium crowned with a domed ceiling. Stained glass windows towered overhead, depicting scenes of angels and saints. But the light filtering through wasn't sunlight. It was red, bleeding across the floor in long, violent streaks. In the center of the atrium stood a table. Upon it lay dozens of photographs, old and curling with age. Emily approached cautiously, her trembling hands brushing across the images. Her face went pale. They were photos of them. Her, Daniel, entering the asylum, standing in the foyer, climbing the stairs. The images had been captured from angles impossible for any camera to have taken, like the house itself had been watching and documenting their every move. Emily's breath hitched. "Daniel, these are from tonight." Daniel picked one up. His own face stared back at him, eyes wide, sweat on his brow. He turned the photo over. On the back, words scrawled in ink so dark it bled into the paper. "You will never leave." The doors of the atrium slammed shut. The stained glass windows shuttered, the angels' painted faces cracking, their smiles splitting into grotesque grins. One by one, the panes shattered, raining crimson shards across the floor. And from the broken glass poured shadows. They crawled like smoke, twisting and knotting together, forming hands, limbs, and faceless heads. Whispers filled the chamber, rising into screams as the shadows lunged. Daniel grabbed Emily and pulled her beneath the table. The shadows clawed at the wood above, splinters raining down on them. Emily sobbed, pressing her face into Daniel's chest. "We're going to die here." "No," Daniel said, though he didn't believe it. His voice was shaking. "We just have to find a way out." He spotted a stairwell across the chamber, narrow, winding, disappearing into darkness. The shadows clawed and screamed, but for a brief second they pulled back, recoiling as though giving the illusion of escape. Daniel knew it was a trap, but they had no choice. "Run!" he shouted. They sprinted across the chamber, shadows grabbing at their ankles, slicing at their clothes. Emily screamed as claws tore across her arm, leaving long, burning gashes. Daniel pulled her up the stairwell, slamming the iron door behind them. Darkness swallowed them. The stairwell was impossibly tall, spiraling upward like a twisted spine. The walls were damp, lined with faded writing. Daniel lifted his flashlight, the beam cutting across the scribbles. It wasn't writing. It was scratches. Dozens, hundreds of fingernail marks dug deep into the stone, as if countless people had clawed at the walls trying to climb their way out. Some scratches ended in long, desperate gouges, trails that stopped suddenly, as though the people had been ripped away mid-scream. Emily's voice shook. "They've been here before us." Daniel kept climbing. "Then maybe some of them got out." But he knew that wasn't true. The air grew thinner as they climbed, colder, as if they were rising into something far from the world they knew. His chest burned, every breath slicing his lungs like glass. And then finally, they reached a landing. A single wooden door stood at the top. Emily collapsed against the wall, her body trembling. "Please let it be the way out." Daniel shoved the door open. They stumbled into a bedroom. The air was suffocatingly still. The furniture was covered in sheets, white and rotting, but perfectly arranged, like someone had been expecting them. In the corner of the room stood a bed. Its sheets were pulled tight, too tight, as if hiding something beneath. Emily whispered, Don't look." But Daniel's flashlight was already moving. The sheets rose. Something was lying there. It shifted. Slowly, and then with a sound that would haunt them forever, it sat up. The sheets fell away, revealing a body not dead, not alive. Its skin clung to bone, its mouth sewn shut with black thread, its hollow eyes fixed on them. It raised one trembling hand and pointed at the wall. Daniel followed its gesture. On the wall was a mirror, but this one was different. It reflected them, both of them. And behind their reflections, the bandaged figure loomed. Emily screamed, the mirror shattered, and the house laughed. The old house had begun to feel alive, not just in spirit but in flesh. Each wall, each stair, each flickering bulb seemed to pulse with a rhythm, as though the house itself had veins that carried something darker than blood. Clara's body ached from exhaustion, but she refused to sleep. Every time her eyes drifted shut, the whispers returned, sometimes gentle, sometimes shrieking. She had learned that closing her eyes left her vulnerable, as if the house took it as an invitation to invade her dreams and make them bleed into reality. The fire in the old fireplace had long since died, leaving behind nothing but cold ash. And yet, when Clara turned toward it, she saw the faintest glow, as though embers had relit themselves. Within the glow, she saw shapes, not flames, but faces. Faces of people she did not know, yet felt she should. Each face appeared for only seconds. A boy clutching his chest, a woman screaming, an old man staring wide-eyed at something unspeakable. Then, finally, her own face emerged in the ember light, pale, cracked like porcelain, and smiling back at her. Clara recoiled in horror. The house was no longer content with watching her. It was now showing her what she would become. The room that shouldn't exist. Her legs shook as she stumbled down the hallway, searching desperately for any sign of escape. The front door, as always, stood impossibly far away, as if the corridor stretched itself endlessly. Instead, she found herself drawn toward a door she swore hadn't been there before. It was narrow, painted black, with a handle that was ice-cold to the touch. Clara hesitated, then pulled it open. The room inside was impossibly small, more like a closet than anything else. And yet, it stretched deeper than her eyes could follow. The walls were lined with photographs, hundreds of them, pinned like insects. Her stomach dropped when she realized every single photo was of her, sleeping, reading, eating, crying. Moments she thought were private had been captured, frozen in time. Some pictures were from years ago, in her childhood bedroom, in her teenage apartment. Others were from hours earlier, inside this very house. Her trembling hands reached toward the closest photo. When she touched it, the paper felt wet. She pulled her hand back to see her fingertips stained red. The photograph was bleeding. A voice whispered directly into her ear, "You've always belonged here." The descent below panic surged, and Clara bolted out of the photo-lined room. Her foot caught the edge of a stair, and before she could stop herself, she tumbled down, into darkness. The fall ended not with pain, but with silence. She landed in a place that didn't feel like the basement she had glimpsed before. This one was vast, cathedral-like, with ceilings so high they vanished into blackness. Shadows writhed along the walls, not cast by any source of light but moving of their own accord. At the center of the floor was a circle etched into stone, filled with carvings that looked older than language. Symbols twisted into each other, glowing faintly with the same ember light she had seen in the fireplace. And then, she realized she wasn't alone. Figures stood around the circle, not people, not fully, but echoes of them. Some wore clothes centuries out of date, their eyes hollow, their mouths sewn shut. Others looked half-formed, their faces blurred as though the house hadn't finished creating them. They all turned toward her at once. Clara's breath froze in her chest. Her legs refused to move. And then, the floor beneath her shifted, pulling her toward the circle. The bargain. The figures parted as Clara was dragged forward. She stumbled into the glowing carvings, feeling their heat against her skin. The circle pulsed like a beating heart, and in that rhythm she heard a voice. Not a whisper this time, but something booming, resonant, ancient. It filled her head. It filled the entire house. "You see what they became," the voice thundered. "They entered. They stayed. They were watched. They belong to me." Clara clutched her ears, trying to shut it out. "I don't belong to you," she screamed. The house groaned. The walls shuddered. The symbols flared brighter. The voice spoke again. "Every step you took here was already written. Every choice already made. You are not Clara. You are mine." And then, in the shadows beyond the circle, she saw it. Her double. Another Clara, identical in every detail, but smiling with eyes far too wide. Her double stepped forward, her voice calm, chilling. "Don't fight it. We can live forever here." The circle pulsed beneath Clara's feet, each glow like a heartbeat that wasn't her own. Her double stood across from her, the same face, the same trembling hands, the same fearful eyes, but corrupted with a smile that didn't belong to her. "Why fight it?" the other Clara whispered. "This house isn't a prison. It's a home. You'll never grow old here. You'll never die. You'll never be alone." The words echoed as if the house itself agreed, whispering from its walls. Doors creaked open in the distance, windows rattled as if clapping approval. The entire structure leaned in to hear her choice. Clara's knees buckled. She wanted to run, but her body wouldn't obey. Something in her in her soul, was tied to this place now. The shadows around the circle drew closer. Dozens of faces, human and not, stared at her, waiting, expecting. The air was so heavy she could barely breathe. The mirror of truth. Suddenly, the glowing symbols shifted. The carvings on the floor rearranged themselves, forming a shape Clara hadn't seen before. A mirror. The stone itself bent like liquid, and within seconds a dark glassy surface rose before her. The reflection staring back wasn't her double this time. It was her, Clara, but aged, hollow-eyed, a husk of who she was. The mirror. Clara raised a hand and pressed it against the glass. Clara's own hand rose instinctively, as though compelled to follow. When their palms met, the glass rippled, and a terrible realization struck her. The house wasn't showing her a possibility. It was showing her the end. Every soul it had taken became this, empty, drained, forgotten. The people she had seen in the ember faces, the photo room, the sewn-mouthed figures, they had all made the same mistake. They had stayed too long. The choice that isn't a choice. Her double stepped closer, smirking. "You don't have to fear this. Let it happen. Let it all go. The house will care for you. It always has. You've felt it, haven't you? The warmth, the watching, the love." Clara shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "You call this love? This is possession." The walls moaned as if offended. The house itself groaned so loudly that dust rained from the ceiling. The double tilted her head. "It doesn't matter. Whether you accept it or not, you're already home." At that, the shadows surged forward, wrapping around Clara's legs, pulling her deeper into the glowing circle. She screamed, clawing at the floor, but the carvings burned her hands. The double only watched, smiling wider. The breaking point. Clara's mind raced. There had to be a way out. Every prison had a weakness, every curse a flaw. And then, she remembered the photos, the snapshots of her life, bleeding as though alive. The house had been watching her for years. But how? She forced herself to think. If the house lived by watching, by consuming the moments it captured, then perhaps breaking that gaze could starve it. She dragged herself forward, reaching into her pocket. Her phone. Cracked, drained, useless. But it had a camera, a lens, a watcher of its own. Her hands shook as she lifted it toward her double. "If you want to watch me," she gasped, "then watch this." The flash went off. The house reacts. The scream that followed was not human. The double staggered back, her smile shattering like glass. The mirror Clara splintered, her aged form breaking into shards. The circle flared so brightly it blinded Clara. The house shrieked, walls trembling, wood splintering, windows exploding outward. The photographs in the secret room ignited all at once, burning with red fire. Faces melted into ash. The stitched-mouthed figures wailed as they crumbled into dust. Clara forced herself up, fighting against the shadows still gripping her ankles. She fired the camera flash again and again, until the light tore holes through the darkness. Each burst weakened the grip of the house. Each flash peeled back the illusion. And then, the shadows recoiled completely, vanishing into the cracks of the floor. For the first time, Clara stood in silence. The circle faded. The double was gone. Escape? She staggered up the stairs, every bone in her body aching. The front door, impossibly distant before, now stood right there, only steps away. She didn't question it. She just ran. Her trembling hands gripped the handle. For the first time, it turned. The door creaked open. A rush of night air hit her face, cold and sharp. The outside world, the trees, the stars, the grass wet with dew. Clara stumbled out, collapsed onto the ground and sobbed. The house loomed behind her, silent now, windows dark, still. Had she beaten it, or had it simply let her go? The final glance. Clara forced herself to her feet. She couldn't stay here. She had to leave, far away, never look back. And yet, something pulled at her. A whisper. "We'll always be watching." Her eyes turned, unwilling, to the upstairs window, and there it was, her double, standing in the glass, smiling. The house had not let her go. It never would. Outro. And so ends the tale of Clara and the house that watches. Maybe you believe she escaped. Maybe you believe she never left at all. But the truth is simpler, darker. Once a house begins to watch you, it never stops. So tonight, when you draw your curtains and turn off your lights, ask yourself, are you the one watching your home, or is your home watching you? Because some houses never sleep, and neither do the things inside them.